Hello and welcome to the first in a small series I plan on doing about the various parts of Shadowruns and Shadowrunning and that kind of stuff. This it was in no way not loosely inspired by the debugging threads that were up on the Shadowrun subreddit. Today I'm going to be talking about the meat and a couple of ways that it is quite possibly the most important scene of the entire game you are about to play. It is the one scene that is probably going to be in one form or another in every game. The players need to get their job from somebody, and this is where that happens. This is where that groundwork is laid and that kind of stuff. And a couple of different ways that you can change the tone you're going for is my intention today. The first and easiest way to insinuate on what kind of job you are setting them up for is via the location. If you are dealing with, let's say, a repeat Johnson, chances are he might operate out of either like the same location or maybe linked location. Maybe it's a Mafia Johnson who always has his meats in a different Italian restaurant, or maybe it's somebody from Aztec who does it in back rooms of stuffer shacks, or something along those lines where it is a consistent theme of, hey, this is what you guys are signing up for from the get-go. It is also an indication of your early safety levels. For there's a friend of mine who likes to have his Johnson meets with his very professional on point Johnson in a building that is like 8 to 10 stories tall and is kind of broken down and open air because should things go horribly wrong, well, you already know that you're walking into a dangerous situation when the building is tall and dilapidated, and then you run into the man who's wearing a very nice suit with some guys, which we'll get into talking about on the Johnson part of things. Um, you can do dependent upon how your team likes to run. They can do a bit of a legwork on the location because they'll have knowledge skills or maybe shadow community knowledge skills about different areas. It's like, okay, we're meeting in the back of a stuffer shack. Roll some dice, find out there's a couple of Aztec people who like to work out of stuffer shacks, or there's this one guy who likes to pose as Aztec who does it out of stuffer shacks to throw you guys off. It can also be used to set the general mood. I did a if you're going to do a run that is mostly gang oriented, the gang that is sponsoring said run will have them meet somewhere on their turf. Therefore, you know that you're going into a place where they have a lot of strength and they've already put you at a disadvantage. There's a couple of other interesting things. If the Johnson pulls up in a limo and invites you guys all to step in, and it's a full of luxury on the inside of it, that tells you something else about what kind of situation you're getting into. That would tell me that it's not really a high corporate job, but it's more of a high profile, which turns into Horizon Corporation, but more of a high profile rock star slash movie star kind of thing. Whereas if I am invited to a meet that is in a high price downtown exotic coffee shop, that tells me it is more of a richer clientele or a more corporate, this is a display of power type situation. Look at this uh, reclusive? I don't know. I think that's the word I want. Look at this location that I am bringing you into, even though I know you can't normally get into it. It's why restaurants are very common to have meats in because one, it puts you at an advantage because it's a public place. Two, there's all kinds of meetings that go on all the time in restaurants. When a Johnson says they're going to pay for your meal at a very expensive place, it is a show of wealth and power because this is stuff that you can't normally have that I am giving to. Coming down a little bit, we're going to start talking about the actual Johnson himself, where three pretty big indications on who he might be, his profession level, and that kind of stuff. right from the get go is going to be, what is he wearing? Is he wearing, let's say, a Horizon branded Sleeping Tiger outfit? Is he wearing gang colors? Is he trying his best to look like he fits into a place? Like, is he wearing street clothes at a soy bucks with a crazy uh with a crazy exotic, the kind of guys that get the 8 syllable words for their Starbucks coffee? Is he drinking something like that, wearing normal people street clothes in a situation where it's like, all right, he's not acting like what his outfit portrays him as, so he's slumming it, as it were. Um, who he's accompanied with is very also important. Man, my words are just terrible today. I apologize. Um, does he have obvious bodyguards? Because that also sends a very particular message. The Johnson who is there with his troll in a three-piece suit and mirror shades, a little bit of gold. That tells you a very different story than if you don't see anybody who is there, obviously with the Johnson, or if he strolls in late, like you know he's attempting to get there after the runners. That tells you some very big things. The other things that are very easy to tell is whether or not, like, if somebody senses and they see that he's being flanked by a spirit, that tells you that he is a mage or is a mage, or what other precautions he has taken. There are a couple of semi-standard precautions that somebody on the team should take. These include, but are not limited to, white noise generators, because sometimes people like to listen in on conversations. Area jammers, because some people don't like being recorded. Pre-reserving a back room, pretty important. Having the meet out in front of everybody is a good way to have a lot of unnecessary attention drawn to you. Um, has he rented out the entire place? Is this the kind of situation where you're walking into a restaurant and he has reserved every table from the hours of 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and you are expected to be there at like 7:15 for dinner? You come in and the entire restaurant is open. And is open in that there are no patrons sitting there, but you guys. Um, a couple of other precautions are things like when you have the meet in the car, like I mentioned, you're not going to have anybody listening, and you can be on the move to wherever it is you're going. There's uh, certain other things that certain Johnsons will do, having setting up a ward or watcher spirits, or having spirit magical overwatch, or even just you go into the back room and he's got two bodyguards standing by the door, because that's watching his back. There's a bunch of different ways to increase the security level of a meet, and which of those a Johnson takes gives you a very good indication of what is up, what his intentions might be, and the general threat and security level. If a Johnson is really paranoid that his parent company is after him and he takes all of these extra steps, it tells your players that the run you're about to go on has a higher, let's call them danger levels, because the guy who's hiring you is afraid of these guys, and this is the steps he's gone through. So this is what that you might have to be on the watch for. Um, I split up the job itself into two things, of the pitch and the job, because there are two different steps to a job usually. Usually it's here's a brief overview, and then whether or not you accept depends upon what you are told there and how the team feels about it. And then there's after you accept, here's a bunch more information. Um, so up front, if the Johnson is like, I have a bunch of information, it begins to spout forth this information. That can make it feel pretty good about things in a couple of different ways. For one, it helps you feel like this Johnson's not going to screw you because he wants the job done, because he's given you this information, or he is well informed. It's also a good way to gauge the professional level of a Johnson and see what you may have missed. if you don't like if he's being real professional in the amount of upfront information he is given or he is giving you, but you didn't see him with any bodyguards, you can make the fair assumption that there's probably one or two that are maybe outside in the restaurant proper because you guys have gone to a back room. Maybe he feels really comfortable in this situation because it is in his gang's territory. If you make a move against him, you're not getting out of it. Something along those lines. Um, for another aspect is how much money is he offering? If you walk into a place and he tells you that he wants you to basically it's like I need you to kill a man. And for some runners they don't like doing wet work. That is definitely a thing that some people hang on to morals about and hey, being upfront about that is okay, I need you to kill a guy and I'm going to offer you 5,000 new yen. Well, what does that tell you? One, either your Johnson is either way underestimating what is appropriate for murder and what is the intended difficulty of getting to this guy. 5,000 Nguyen is a guy who has a semi-public life, maybe a couple of, maybe a spouse, children, something along those lines. But somebody who lives in like a C or D zone who works a moderately dangerous job, and maybe your Johnson just wants him off to make it look like an accident. 5,000 Nguyen is not the price that it will take to get a guy who works at Federated Boeing and kill him. That's just a completely different thing. Um, so that is a big indicator of the Johnson's assumption of how difficult the job will be, which when you start pairing it with the other stuff will give you a bit of an idea on his payroll. Remember that, of course, Johnsons were always kind of underbid. You never accept the first offer. So, yes, he may say that he wants to pay you 5,000 to kill an easy target. He may go up to 7 dependent upon the promises that are made and the arguments that are made and some of the other details and basically how well you do on your negotiation test. Um, Another important indicator is how is the information delivered? Is he speaking word of mouth? Because that means that he himself knows a bunch of this stuff. So that down the line, if there is a problem, he is somebody that knows a lot of details about the run. If, however, it is something that is handed over on a data chip, and the way that your Johnson was talking previously, he may be a secondary hire, like a corporation may have hired him to hire some runners to do a thing because they don't want their involvement known. So he will have the basic information about what the runners are to do, but then we'll hand over the rest of it on a data chip that's encrypted or whatever along those lines. Um, a lot of Johnsons will also hand over comm links that have information on them and have a single two sets of numbers, and one is a conference call to the 4 other comm links that are handed out to the runners from the Johnson, and the other number is a call this number when the job is completed. And then on it, it'll have data of dossiers and locations, that kind of stuff. So how that information is given to the runners and how much of it is really important for sending the right information about, hey, this is the kind of stuff you're dealing with. If this is your team, your group's first big corp job and they're stepping up from, street level stuff, you're going to want to make your first one of these a fairly information dense packet. They may not be used to doing legwork on a bunch of different things, and I'll have some legwork videos up in the near future. Um, so showing them this is the kind of information that you can get through legwork, have the building plans, have the dependent upon the type. If it's a data steal, be like, this is the floor that the offline prototype is being worked on in. This is the building plans. This is the guy who's in the head of the project. This is the guy who he's having issues with at work. Here is outside pictures of the building. Here is a delivery schedule. Having that information just kind of given to them at the beginning helps them get ideas of the types of legwork that they can do while giving them a bunch of information to sift through. You don't want to give them the exact things. You don't want to tell them, here's how you do the run. You want to give them the room to fill it out on their own as they follow up these threads that you have given them in this data package. Or if it is a simple sounding run, but you don't give them any information, that can send you a lot of different uh, headset turned off. That can give you a lot of different clues on things as well, because this could be a man who's trying to frame a guy. This could be a guy that's doing something in a fit of anger. Maybe he puts out a hit on a guy, but a couple of days later is like, actually, you know what? We talked things out. Could you just not kill him? Which I now may actually do on a run. Now that I've thought about it. Interesting. And then it'll come down to whether or not your runners accept the job as it is presented to them. Generally, there's a minimal information, a price talked about, negotiations made, and then whether or not you accept or you move on with your day. The job itself will be where the Johnson gets down to a lot more of the details. If it is a word of mouth type situation where the Johnson is thinking to talking, you'll be able to ask and answer questions back and forth. But the main thing that is an indicator of how dangerous a run can be is your timeline. If you tell the runners you have 3 weeks to complete this job, you have a huge amount of time to do a thing. You can get different gear, you can work contacts, you can do multiple intrusions on their host, you can learn specific skills, you can probably raise an attribute, maybe depending upon how much training you did. Maybe learn some martial arts. There's a lot of run specific things that you can do to make that run easier. Whereas if it is a significantly shorter timeline, well, that's going to cost you more nougat. You want this done in the next 12 hours? Well, hold up. I had my daughter's recital to go to. That's going to make things a bit more awkward. The clarity will come into how much the upfront information that Johnson gives you is direct. Does he tell you about their magical defenses? Does he tell you about how their host is usually run? Does he tell you that they have some maintenance going on inside the building on the heating and air conditioning system next Tuesday? That kind of thing. The information itself is nearly as important as how much it makes sense and how actually useful it is. Um, your Johnson may know all kinds of things, and your runners may ask them all kinds of questions, but how it is delivered from the Johnson, whether or not he name drops people, whether or not he uh, is evasive on some of the questions, is a pretty big indicator of what kind of run they're going into. And if the guy is able, for example, if the guy is able to give you a lot of personal details about uh, the other employees, the staff, the inner workings of the place, maybe he works there. That's a pretty big indication there that it's might not be a screw job, might be something a little bit more personal, that kind of stuff. And then there's some restrictions where if let's say he doesn't want anybody killed except for, the target, or I need you guys to do this, let's fit under the time, before such and such date, or I need you guys to do this whichever day you do it in, I need you to do it at nighttime. Or I don't know, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Maybe one of the restrictions is they can't know anybody was there. It needs to look like it was business as usual. That's kind of a pretty big indicator of where it falls on the threat level. Like if it's I need you guys to do this without anybody knowing, maybe that insinuates that, if not for the Johnson, but also for the team, that response is going to be quick and brutal. Maybe they're located near HTR response facility. Maybe they have a larger on-site personal security response team. Maybe they have a large magical support so that when things go wrong, a bunch of spirits show up. Or maybe the guy just doesn't want it to come back on him that it was his fault. And if you guys screw up and get captured, well, you're probably going to talk because that's kind of what happens. Um, I hope this gives you guys a little bit of an idea on how to set up your meets in a way to infer the the threat or the theme of your runs, or at the very least for the run that is relevant to the meet that you're talking about. But this is, I will probably make an entire other video on Johnson betrayals because that is a thing that happens in Shadowrun every once in a while. It is not something you want to do often to your players because then they'll stop trusting anybody. And that's not necessarily even completely in character. They may stop trusting you as a GM running the games because the last 3 runs you went on, you screwed us. And that's not good. Uh, it also doesn't make a lot of sense in game because not only is it the runner's reputation that goes into the equation when getting shadow work done, but it is also the fixers and to an extent the Johnsons. If Johnsons are looking to get a thing done, and they are say from S Technology, or they maybe even just be from Aslan, but not actually officially related to the Corp, but some Aztec Johnson is out there screwing runners left, right, and center. Aslan guy may look to try and get this Johnson taken out. That kind of thing. It's doesn't make for good business for anybody, so it doesn't happen nearly as often as a lot of people fear that it does. Um, so, with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and move on from this video, and hopefully next week I'll be up with some legwork videos of different flavors. Uh, I will link in the video description the debugging thing that they talked about on the Shadowrun subreddit, which has some interesting information that I didn't touch on. And I will look to get a little bit more in depth on the legwork sections and the where you go from here. Um, I am not so good on uh, the planning thing. I am much more an improvisational related game master. As such, the run notes and such that I have put up on my channel are all based upon runs that I have done and have completed, not preemptively made up, because that's just not how I like to work. But thank you guys all for hanging out and checking out the video. If you want to reach me, you can email me at GMbamce@gmail.com, or I am on Twitter at GM_Bamce, where I will tweet about videos that are uploaded to my YouTube channel when I go live for my live streams, Runner Hub games that I am playing in or running, or basically anything else Shadowrun related that I do. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.